My name's Evan Williams. I was born in London. I was raised in Stonebridge. I now live in Los Angeles. Actually, I didn't train initially to be a ballet dancer. I just wanted to dance. I was fortunate enough to go to a high school that had a PE teacher that had a really big interest in dance, and she exposed us to all sorts of dance, everything from, I remember going to see Wayne Sleep in Song and Dance. We went to the Royal Opera House, and that was my first exposure to one of my favorite choreographers today, Ira Killian. The Royal Ballet did a ballet called Return to a Strange Land. We went to see things like musical theatre. We went to see plays. So we were really exposed to, and that was in the days of GLAR, Greater London Arts. And so yeah, we were exposed to all sorts of spheres of the arts, and dance was one of those mediums. And then I started to watch a program called Dance on 4. Years back in the day when you had to wait until there was dance on television to see stuff. And I saw Rambert, and Rambert were doing a piece called, I saw Rambert do Ghost Dancers. And that was my first kind of exposure to the idea that really well-trained contemporary dancers tended to have a really good, strong classical ballet technique. And I thought that's what I want to do. So it was really about getting a strong technique with a view to doing modern stroke contemporary dance. So initially, I started at the Young Place in Euston. That was on Saturdays. And then I went to Weekend Arts College on Sundays. And then my professional training, I trained at the Royal Ballet School in, at that time it was in Targarth Road in Hammersmith. Because I wanted to get the really good, strong, solid classical ballet technique. And it's the best school for classical ballet in the country. Some would argue in the world. Yeah. At that time, you applied for a grant from your local council. So I applied to Brent Council, and they paid the fees. And then I also got, I wrote to various different charities for funding for, just for general living expenses. So I wrote to, I went to my local library, and I got there was a big manual that you could get at the time, and I wrote to, I think probably about 50 different charities, of which I got money from the Prince's Trust. I got money from the Cloth Workers Foundation. There were a couple of others, the names I can't remember right now. When I when I said to my mum that I wanted to be a ballet dancer, she said to me, "You can't make money doing that." She had little to no understanding, or it was just a completely foreign language for her. But actually, in her defense, I actually started dancing because there was a class in the community centre in Stonebridge, and a friend of hers said, "You should take her on to the dance class down the road there." So I went to the Hilltop, it was called the Hilltop, and there was a guy there, Clive Johnson, he was teaching a jazz class. That's actually where I really started. And so she kind of knew that, I mean, she knew that I loved dancing, she knew that that was what I was into, but she had no clue or understanding of the idea that you could actually have a career or actually make a living from it. And so for her, it was really just about just new territory. And I think in what way she could be, she was extremely, in retrospect now, my mom's not with us anymore, she's passed, but she was really supportive actually. She was very kind of okay, if that's what you want to do, let's see what it's about and what it entails, and let's look into it. I stayed at Stonebridge. I stayed at home when I was at the Royal Ballet School. And so I went from a solid black environment, as black as it gets, right, to an environment where it was the complete opposite. I was literally one of the only black people in the building, bar the people that worked in the cafeteria downstairs. So for me, it was a huge cultural shift. I think I didn't really spend time analyzing it and breaking down what that meant because I was so focused on, I'd got into one of the most prestigious schools in dance in the country. And so I was so focused on that I wasn't really even breaking down or analyzing what that would mean for me as a human being culturally, emotionally, spiritually. So that was, that was huge. It was huge. This is when I first started to become, there was publicity. And this is when I moved from being what I call a dancer to being a black dancer. Because of course they wanted to make, they wanted to make it be known, or let it be known that they were hiring a black dancer. And in retrospect, of course I went along with it because, as a dancer, you do what you're told. You need to be here or there, you go. But I was somewhat resistant to the idea of being put in that box. I was very aware that I wanted to be just a dancer like anyone else in the company. I didn't want to necessarily be marginalized. And so that was the beginning of that feeling of like, am I here because I'm a dancer or am I here because I'm black? Like which, and it felt like that was the beginning of me feeling like I was there to tick a box. It was funny because I can't remember whether Darren was 1 or 2 years below me at the school, but so when I got to the Royal Ballet School, I actually, because I joined at 16 with kids that had come from White Lodge, technically I wasn't as proficient as they were, I wasn't as skilled as they were, so I actually went back to White Lodge to take some extra classes, particularly in partnering, I remember, and I would see Darren there. But it was one of those school kid type things, like to speak to somebody that was in a lower grade than you was like, that was a separate entity. So we never actually had any personal interaction between each other. It was always very much he was over there and I was over there, which, as an adult now, reflecting on that now, I would totally make a beeline for that person if I was in that situation today. But at that time, it was very much, he's in White Lodge, I'm in the upper school. It was two very separate entities. So we didn't have a great deal of interaction in those early days. I was really fortunate in that I didn't audition after leaving the school because I got offered a contract with what was then Sadler's Wells Royal Ballet turning into the Birmingham Royal Ballet. It was the transition year, 1990, when the company went from being in London under the name of Sadler's Wells Royal Ballet and was moving to Birmingham to become the Birmingham Royal Ballet. So I was one of, I think, 6 dancers from the school that were offered contracts. So I went straight from the school into the Birmingham Royal Ballet. So London was my home, man. I was like attached to London, and I didn't realize at the time how fortunate I was in that I had got into a dance school in London. I hadn't done the work to know that most people don't get into the Royal Ballet. Most of the kids that were from the Royal Ballet School at the time came from further afield. So for me to be able to be at this school and stay in London at home was somewhat novel. And so moving to Birmingham was actually not just moving to Birmingham, it was also leaving home as well, leaving London. And so that was new. That was definitely exciting because, I was like, yeah, man, I want to get out of Stonebridge. Everybody wanted to get out of Stonebridge. Everybody wanted to have their own space, and all that sort of stuff. So that part of it was good. It was, it was new beginnings. I mean, I was 19, 20 years old at the time? Who doesn't want to get out of home when they're 19, 20? Okay, so I was as any corps de ballet, I did things like the Mazurka in Swan Lake. I did the few kind of, I guess, main roles that I were given. I remember I was given a couple of choreographic opportunities. Matthew Hart did a new ballet for the company, and he cast me in his new ballet. William Tuckett did a new ballet in the company. I was given a role, license his roving hands to music by Jimi Hendrix. I did that with William Tuckett. And then I was given the kind of like roles that I was given by the company per se tended to, or like lead roles tended to veer towards the dramatic. So I was given Tybalt in Romeo and Juliet. And then there's the infamous Moore and Petrushka, which was that ballet should never, ever see the light of day again. It's the Moore and Petrushka. It's an extremely racist ballet. It was a racist role then. It is a racist role now. I did it because I was eager to do what was at the time considered a main role. I wouldn't even think about doing something like that now, and I feel horrified actually thinking about it that I was even asked to do that then, and it's a shame. So for me, I stayed in the corps de ballet, and I was there for, I think all in all 4 years, and each year that I was there, it was this question of, why am I here? Should I stay? Maybe it's going to get better. It will improve. Maybe next year I'll be given more opportunities, etc. And I think slowly but surely it kind of dawned on me that this was probably going to be what it is. And for me, it was really just about still just wanting to dance, wanting to get on that stage, wanting to perform, wanting to work with various choreographers, being given certain opportunities, etc. So, for me, it was like, I'm not going to stay here and just kind of turn into dead wood. Bro, I'm bailing. See ya. I'm out of here. And I didn't do my first open audition until I left the Birmingham Royal Ballet and went to New York to audition for the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theatre. Alvin Ailey came to the Coliseum in London, and I saw the company in London and just fell in love with the company. I saw, what for me was just not just amazing choreography, but amazing dancers as well. So I took it upon myself, in my young, naive and excited self, to go to New York. Didn't know anybody in the company, didn't know anything, didn't know the director, no relationship or anything like that. So I went to New York, auditioned for Ailey and got offered a contract. So I left the company and went to New York and danced with Ailey, which was, Ailey was a fantastic experience for me because, for many reasons, for the reasons that I've just described, it was great for me to walk into an environment where I was just a dancer. I was not a black dancer, I was just a dancer. And I genuinely felt like the company, Judith Jameson and Chaya, who were running the company at the time, they were excited about me. They were excited about my talent, what I could do, and it was also just being around a company of dancers where I could, going back to what we were speaking earlier on about the cultural shifts of coming from a very black environment and going into a very white middle class environment, I walked into Ailey, and despite the differences in culture between, black British people and black Americans, I walked in and it was just a shorthand. It was just a shorthand culturally in terms of just things that we talked about, music that we liked, food that we ate, etc. It was just a real, and I needed that. I needed that at that time. I needed to be in that environment where I was just kind of, I could just go and just really hone my craft, work on technique, work with great choreographers, do great choreography. And then on top of that, the other great thing with Ailey is it's a touring company, so I was getting to go all over America. There's not a single state in America that we didn't visit. We did a great European tour, so I was going all over Europe. So it was a really pretty special experience for me. I only stayed at Ailey for 2 years, and then I went to Geneva Ballet. And I stayed at Geneva Ballet, and I went to Geneva Ballet really because I really, really wanted to make a beeline for that more European stroke neoclassical. Well, I wouldn't even call it neoclassical. It's like contemporary ballet type world. So the works of people like Forsyth, like Killian. I wanted to do more of that type of work. So I went to Geneva. Yeah, been about a bit. I went back to school and retrained as a physical therapist. And I was working as a physical therapist, and I'm still working as a physical therapist now. And then I met Debbie, and I said to Debbie, she didn't know who I was. I was just a parent, dropping my kid off, picking my kid up. And I said to her, look, I've just got to say thank you to you, because when I was a kid, I used to watch Fame with my leg warmers on in second position. And you very much inspired me in my early days. And she was like, what do you mean? I said I was a dancer, trained at the Royal Ballet School. And she was like, what? So me and Debbie got talking. And then she lost her director of the school, and then she asked me if I would take over as the director of the academy. So I was the director of the academy while I was doing, I became the director of the Debbie Allen Dance Academy. And I did that for while I was doing my doctorate degree in physical therapy in Los Angeles. You know, I was really fortunate. I got into like great companies, man, and I got to tour, and I got to work with some. Choreographically, I got to work with some really good, interesting choreographers. So there isn't any one specific highlight. I think, again, even though being in the Birmingham Royal Ballet had its difficulties, it was still, being part of a really prestigious, really highly ranked company in the world. And I wouldn't, even with its difficulties, I wouldn't change that now for the world. That's really made me the human being that I am now. And stepping out of that comfort zone, coming from where I came from and into that was an exposure that is unique, and that laid the foundation as well. I mean, my first tour, like I said, was going to somewhere like New Zealand. I came from Stonebridge and ended up in New Zealand and Hong Kong. How many people do you know that get to do that? Do you know what I mean? It's like, that was an exposure and that laid the foundation for me to be where I am now in Los Angeles. Travel is no big, I've been all over the world. I've both in companies and of my own volition. I've been to China, there's not a country in Europe I haven't been to. I've been in every single state all over the United States. So all of that is part of the dance. My dance background and my dance training laid the foundation for that. So I would say the whole it's a special world. It's a special, I had a special career, and yeah. I would probably say that last year in the company, leaving the Birmingham Royal Ballet and really trying to come to terms with the idea that I was probably at the top of where I was going to get in that institution, and leaving what was considered just such a highly ranked, a company like that was a tough decision, tough choice. But in retrospect now, I think it was really brave of me. I was young, I was naive, I think it was a really brave decision to make. This is a really special question for me because as a physical therapist, somebody who's studied anatomy, physiology, understands the body from a dancer's perspective, there is not a single person on the planet that I know that was born and raised to stand on one leg with the other leg in the air and turn as many times as they can. Who was born to do that? Where is that body? I mean, they would have you believe that that body lives in in a certain, there's an existence, but really there isn't an ideal body for classical ballet. We create that body, we mold that body. That's why in places like Russia, they select those bodies before they've come out of the womb. And they're molding the feet and the legs. They're doing all of that from day one, because we're not born to do the things that classical ballet is asking of us. We're asking the body to do something it absolutely was not designed for. So, they will talk about the perfect legs and feet, etc. And that's why somebody like, the people that, the Darcy Bustles, the Sylvie Guillems, they're the exception. They're not the rule for a reason, because their bodies are unique and designed to be and do things that most of us can't. So I think it's a myth to think that there is an ideal body. I don't think there is one, quite frankly. I think that there are no barriers. I think the barriers that exist are those that we create in our minds. When I reflect on my career, I think that I was so fixated on dancing and being a dancer that if I had stopped to think, before I got to the Birmingham Royal Ballet, if I had stopped to think about being a black dancer, despite the fact that when I auditioned for the Royal Ballet School, I was told before I auditioned, don't even bother auditioning. I'm not going to say who told me this, but it was from one of the schools that I was at the time. I was told, don't even bother auditioning. They don't take black dancers. And so had I listened to that advice at that age, I would never have auditioned for the school. Thank God I didn't. I went for it. And I think the same was true when I got to, when I went from the Birmingham Royal Ballet to Ailey. It was like, you're going to go all the way to New York. You don't know anybody there. You're just going to turn up on the day and audition. And I was like, yeah, why not? Just go for it, right? So I think had I had the mental barrier of this was something that I cannot do or should not do, I wouldn't have taken those steps. And as I said, in retrospect, I'm really glad that I did. So I think that I think it's really important now that we extol upon young dancers now. Go for it, man. The sky's the limit. You reach for the moon, and on the way you catch a couple of stars. Right? And one of my biggest things when I was at the Royal Ballet was like, at the end of the day, this is a government-funded house. We get money from the Arts Council, right? So my mum, who worked in a factory, who paid her taxes, is funding this building. So not only should I be here, I actually have a right to be here. And I shouldn't be marginalized to the little theatre around the corner. Put me on the main stage with all the other dancers that are getting government funding. So my answer to that question is no. Fly, fly, fly. Don't let anybody tell you you can't. You can and you will.